Helen, if you want to advance that. Thank you everyone for joining today. Our workshop today, again, it is very participant centered and it is focused on building management commitment for energy and greenhouse gas emission reductions. So in the fall, we did some workshops and we had the awards sort of seeing some of those barriers around energy management commitment to those efforts and the success that the award winners had when they had that commitment. So today what we're going to look at a little bit is how to build that commitment. And myself and Christy Hodgson as energy coaches will be presenting. We've got special guest Stephen Dixon, who many of you already know, with us today as well. So looking forward to diving into it. Helen, if you want to move to the agenda, what we're going to start off with today is talking about, your goals and your audience. What are you trying to achieve with management commitment and who are you trying to get that management commitment from? Then we're going to look at what are some short-term tactics and longer-term strategies to really achieve that commitment. Now, hopefully you all got the pre-work email that had a worksheet. So sort of blurring out there with the auto thing, but having this worksheet, you download it, print it out. You're going to be working through this as we go through the day through our interactive process. So Helen will put that in the chat to download if anyone didn't get it in the email that went out yesterday. So on the next slide, we're going to come back to this Menti question. So for those of you who just joined, didn't join early, we have a question about what barriers do you face because of a lack of commitment towards energy management? So as an energy manager, what are those walls you run into, the headaches that you have because there maybe isn't the level of management commitment you'd like to see? How does that present in terms of challenges in achieving your goals? And we'll hop over to Menti to see some of these answers coming in. All right, so, finances, lack of funds, deprioritized, cultural obstacles to access senior management, labor material resources. So I think these are a lot of things that we've seen with the energy managers and some of the challenges that are faced. And a lot of times, there'll be management commitment in terms of saying there's a commitment, but when it comes down to practical, on the ground, visible commitment, we do see a lot of these barriers popping up. Stephen, do you have any comments with respect to these or insights on these to comment on? And if there's more, Helen, if you can scroll through them.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you can scroll the screen, that would be good. It's interesting. The budget one, it commonly comes up, but the other one, sort of about some of the cultural aspects, I think is particularly important. And I think that those two are not disconnected from one another, because if you don't have sort of the commitment from certain individuals in the organization, then obviously the budget is going to be something that's going to be hard to get to.
Mm-hmm. And there's, I see a comment from Max in the chat as well that, maybe senior management commitment isn't the problem, but it hasn't cascaded down through the levels of management as well. And I think that's another common thing too. Like, we're talking about management commitment, but within an organization, that can be different people on different levels within that.
Yeah. One thing I see there, required to do small projects instead of large projects, and we've seen that from time to time too. But one way you might be able to leverage that, I'm sort of jumping ahead to solutions, is the idea of, well, if we can demonstrate the viability of a small project and how they add up, so if we do the M&V on them properly, then you can start to maybe justify why. So what's the reason behind the small projects? Is it there's no capital? Is it maybe the fear that the large projects may not be as certain, things like that? So
right, it's not just the money, but there's a commitment as long as it's very low risk or low uncertainty. All right, I think these are good, and it's interesting seeing a lot of things, including someone bragging that it's not really a problem and that everyone is committed and actively working. So hopefully you can share some of the things that have worked in your organization with others. On to the next slide. One thing we'll talk about this is those barriers. They're things that we see pop up time and again in organizations that maybe struggle with some level of management commitment. And we know from experience that that lack of management commitment, that lack of support is the number one reason that energy management efforts fail. Even you could have the most talented, brilliant, dedicated energy manager or energy team, but if that commitment isn't there, it's going to struggle. There's going to be challenges within that. And we also look at different levels of it. So on the next slide, we talk about how gaining management support really is a journey. And some organizations, there may be little to no interest in managing energy, reducing GHG emissions. But as they begin to see the value in it and see the results, you may be starting to get some case-by-case commitment. They'll approve some projects, but you still kind of have to fight for that a little bit, and it may be subject to other priorities. So if there's a turn down, if there are other things pop up, it's the energy management stuff that gets deprioritized. What we really want to do is help energy managers, and in your organizations, what you want to try to do is trying to move that level of management commitment up through this, up to the point where you do have that consistent commitment of time and resources, and it is something that's integrated and prioritized throughout the entire organization. The same way that health and safety, production quality, all of those other operational criteria are prioritized and managed, and there is real commitment to those. That's what we want to see and what we want to be working towards.
Jay, one of the things that this, in my mind, implies as you talk through that was the evolution of a process, with a business process that supports energy efficiency, energy projects, all aspects of doing energy management. So having that process and maybe making that as the sort of the longer term goal that you work towards, because that's what this speaks to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we'll move to the next slide. And in that, this brings us to our first breakout room. So, we mentioned in the invite and the reminder that today is going to be an interactive session. We're going to be having breakout rooms for you to discuss these things with your peers and then share some ideas. And what we're going to start off with this first breakout room is thinking about, what is your goal? What is that specific commitment you want to see? So if you bring up that participant worksheet, I'm going to try to put it at just the right height so that this picks it up. It doesn't work that well. But on the first page, there's a place to write down that goal. So in your breakout rooms, we're going to ask you to do two things. One is choose a group leader. And our advice is whoever's name is highest in alphabetical order, you're the group leader. The next thing you're going to do is, Bhavesh, I see you smiling. You just know you're going to be a group leader now. Then the next thing I want you to do is, in your group, discuss what your goal is that you're trying to get commitment for. And be specific. We have some discussion prompts of some general ideas, like approval for a project, for resources, maybe to form an energy team, or to establish more predictable budgets if you've already made some progress along there. But I want you to think about what your specific goal within your organization is that you want management commitment for. So we're going to launch those rooms now. Us as coaches are going to be hopping around just to make sure that things are going all right. And if you have any questions, you can let us know. But really, it will be driven by yourselves. Does anyone have any questions before we jump in there? You can raise a hand or just unmute yourselves. Okay. Nothing seems to be popping up immediately. So we'll head out to those breakout rooms. Helen's going to launch those. You'll see a little pop-up window that should pop up for you, and you just click the join button. And so hopefully there were some good discussions around your goals and some introductions with the breakout room groups. We will be keeping those breakout rooms, as we're going to have 2 more of them when we get into talking about what are some tactics and strategies to build management support and management commitment for energy management efforts. So you'll be going back into those same groups afterwards. But right now, I'd like to hear a bit about the goals that were shared in there. So I'm going to call on a couple of group leaders, starting with room 1. So I think that was with Arash and Asif and Mike and Michael and Nathaniel. Would the group leader from there want to share some of the goals that came up within your breakout room?
Sure. We just had a chance to start the discussion. We didn't really get to the goals. We were talking about, the issues surrounding people, resources, and finances, and a couple of items that came up. At sometimes when you have projects, when you find the finances, when you get the approvals, you may not have the resources on site to do the project. And the other thing that came up is even when the budgets are approved, sometimes you don't, and it's committed, sometimes you might have cutbacks on those commitments and you don't get to spend the whole amount.
Right. Okay. So some of the goals are around there are kind of mitigating those challenges of having those people resources to actually implement the projects and having some confidence that when you do get a project approved, that it's you have those resources that they're committed. Okay, that's great. What about from room 2 where we have Ashish, Bazad, Bhavesh? What were some of the goals that came up in your group?
Yeah, I'll go. So yeah, we didn't quite get to like concrete goals yet, but we were really like strongly discussing how to tie in energy conservation and energy management efforts with like broader corporate greenhouse gas goals, and trying to like frame it not just as an energy savings, but also as carbon tax reduction, carbon penalty reduction, and maybe even creating more investable properties in the portfolio by reducing the emissions of them.
Right. So having that goal of, there's corporate commitment on this one side in GHG emissions, but let's get that commitment to expand to energy efficiency, energy savings, some of these other projects that you may be thinking about. All right, that's great. From anyone from any other rooms have any other interesting goals, specific goals that maybe came up with them that you'd like to share with the broader group?
So it's Alan Sutton from Toyota here, Jay. So our group is very small. We had not a lot of discussion, but it was very cohesive. And what we found is the traditional plan, do, act, check philosophy was pretty predominant in our systems where we have corporate goals or KPIs established. The processes for establishing those targets, the processes for reporting status to those KPIs are well-founded. So the commitment is there. It may not be an energy management commitment. It may be an environmental commitment for emissions, or it might be a production commitment for lower costs. But our group really had the goals focused around KPIs.
Okay.
In my group, if I'm allowed to say something, in my group, we were focusing on naturally about any project. We were discussing about the approval process, funding, which is a common point for everyone with the supporting document and those process. And then we jumped into our recently common target net zero, how to achieve net zero. So in one of our friend live in Thunder Bay, he said that he become success in biomass project. We dry wood chips biomass project, and this year they're able to run boiler from biomass, which is a very good information. So I believe if people interested, they can communicate with him, they can copy their project if they allow. This I like very much. And another point, we were discussing any feasibility or chance to test about small scale vertical wind turbine, like 1 kilowatt, 1.5 kilowatt size vertical. So that a little bit we were discussing.
Yeah, and one thing I find interesting in that is, that goal of like, oh, we got our organization to commit to net zero. Okay, but then, it's up to many of the people on the call as energy managers and people within those organizations to be like, okay, but what are those projects or initiatives or programs that are actually going to get to that higher goal? And a lot of times you have to get commitment for each of those that are going to build you up to that. Oh yeah, we got a corporate goal of net zero, but what does that mean in terms of actual commitments to movement on the ground? And I think we heard that in a lot of goals. So before, on your worksheet on that first page, there's actually 2 spots. There's the goal and then there's the audience. So I want you to just think about, or if you didn't get to the goals, write them down. Think about what your specific goal is. Or not all of them, but a specific goal that you're looking to get management commitment for. Write that in the worksheet. And then on the audience side, think about what is that level, like the tier of management commitment that you're looking for. Because some of these asks, it might be the general manager or the facility manager who you need to get buy-in from. For some of those bigger goals, or like the corporate-wide goals, say if you want to establish a revolving fund for energy efficiency projects or emission reduction projects, that's maybe at a regional or even a CEO level. So thinking about what is your specific goal that you want to get management for, and then who is that audience? When we're talking about senior management, what does that look like?
Hey, Jay, just while people are working, I just wanted to mention about my room outcomes. And because nobody mentioned this before, I think that it's important for people to think about. So I believe one of the goals which was mentioned was human resources. Because if you have a big organization as mine, Canadian Tire, you definitely need more than 2 people to manage all opportunities. Otherwise, you will be just need to prioritize, of course, but it means that the projects will be kind of slowed down. Another thing, it was mentioned about change management and specifically getting in culture of building automation, like physical or virtual, plus achieving attention on simple things, prioritizing waste efficiency rather than going for TV promoted subjects like solar and heat pumps. And,
yeah, I think
another thing was mentioned that it's sometimes when you have transitions between management, it would be good that the commitment from previous predecessor will come to the new people, so that it comes as inheritance, which you need to follow.
Excellent. I think there's some really great things, and we're going to touch on some of that and the distinctions between that and the tactics and strategies, which leads me to handing it over to Christy to talk a little bit about some of those short-term tactics that can help.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear about those goals. And I want to talk a little bit about why we need that support. Gaining management support will accelerate your energy management plans and increase savings potential. But what does that actually look like? So a few examples are gaining a connection between energy data and business decisions. It could be that more people are involved. We heard the goal of getting more human resources. So having more people involved in energy projects and different people bringing new solutions to energy problems. It could be that you're identifying more energy savings opportunities and those are getting actioned. Could be that people are talking more about energy management alongside other business needs. But how do we get there? And so we're going to jump back into another breakout session in just a moment. And we'll ask you to share examples of tactics that have worked for you. If you're facing barriers or you failed to get commitment, talk a little bit more about those barriers and ask the group what they've experienced that has worked for them. Maybe they've had similar barriers but overcome them, and so really do more peer-to-peer sharing about what kind of tactics might work. Now, a quick note on tactics. So short-term tactics are actions that you can take and gain quick wins and establish success that you can later build on to support your energy management program or build on the program that you have. Tactics are helpful in day-to-day operations and interactions that help keep energy management efforts flowing, and using short-term tactics will empower energy managers to take action quickly and mobilize their energy activities. And the next slide.
So we're going to go back into those breakout rooms in a second, and I want you to think about, we'll have these discussion prompts up on the screen, but think about, what are those ways that you could maybe reposition a project, frame it. We heard other people in terms of like aligning things with corporate commitments to GHG, things like that. What are some things that you could do in the short term? This is changing your business case, changing who you're talking to, reframing the issue, something that you can do in the next month or two that you can apply to help get that buy-in and support from management. So we'll head back out to those breakout rooms. Again, our coaches will be going through them to answer any questions or any clarifications that are needed.
And we'll give about 15 or so minutes for your group to discuss, and hopefully everybody in your group will get a chance to add to the conversation. Okay, well, the that I got to pop into were lively with conversation. Hopefully the ones you were in were too. And again, we'd like to hear back from the group. So maybe I'll start with a different group and hear what they had to say. How about we choose group 4? There's someone from group 4 who'd like to, maybe the group lead who'd like to tell us about what tactics you talked about. What did you come up with?
Yeah, so a couple of the tactics we talked about, we mentioned the top 3. So when approaching sites, we take like more of a financial view rather than an energy savings view when we kind of approach them about projects. Completing the EMSS, so forming an energy team. And then once that team, is created, get support from your manager, so then they can kind of influence the other senior management. And then lastly, focusing on smaller projects first to kind of build trust within your organization, and then you can move on to the bigger projects.
Thanks, Brittany. And how about from group 6? Alex, I think you're the group lead in that room.
Sorry, I was talking while on mute. We were talking about planning, not necessarily the shortest turnaround item, but will help pretty much immediately, knowing what's in front of you in terms of the work and what's needed in terms of the budget. So at least you're ready for your next budgeting cycle with the requests to support climate change fund. That's some we spoke about, plus leveraging some incentives or loans to support immediate projects which are within this current budget cycle, was identified as helpful, as a helpful item.
That's great. And the incentives and loans can be really helpful. I also overheard in one of the other breakout rooms use of sort of like alternative financing. And there's some companies that will take on the capital financing and sell energy back to you as a resource. So you end up paying less on a monthly basis, but they're sort of covering that as well. I see Benjamin, your hand up. Did you have some tactics to share?
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I mean, I don't know if this may not be true for every organization, but in our Lord's organization, we're not the only department that has the opportunity to maybe save millions of dollars in our energy costs. Our IT department, for example, they could improve productivity, and that would also save millions of dollars. So focusing on the non-dollar savings of a project or a thing, that can really be beneficial in pushing things forward, and not just the dollars. That's not the only thing that can move things forward, because there's other departments that can do the same thing. So that's not always a winning strategy, just the dollars.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that a lot too, where it's like, hey, this project will save us $100,000 in energy savings. And it's like, well, yeah, but our energy spend is still pales in comparison to resources, human resources, materials, whatever. So it's like the finance may not be already there, but tapping into those non-energy, the non-financial benefits, the operational kind of stuff can be really powerful. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share from their room?
Yes, Jay, I've been in the 8th room, and yes, not mentioning what already been said, we think that understanding your data and drawing opportunity based from your data is a good strategy to get attention in the short term, plus collaboration between team, which is must, because there are lots of opportunities like roofs and rooftop units replacement when operations or maintenance team, they do something without telling energy manager. And and the pilot projects is a good short-term wins.
Right. So a smaller scale project to make it easier for them to say yes, that then may inform.
It's like specific
one.
pilots, right? Because say you want to test technology, you don't want it to burn immediately, like your boss, but you're saying, oh, we will do this in 1 or 2 stores and see how it goes. And if it's looks like very successful, then it will be easy to roll out. Plus, you have opportunity to do this a baby step and learn from your mistake. Saying I'm doing right now pilot projects myself, and I would say like we learned a lot just doing 10 stores instead of 200 stores. If it will be decided to go forward, definitely we will benefit from this.
Olga, another thing I heard in your group from a couple of school boards was the idea of bringing the senior people to the table, like making them part of the decision, like even the project development process, but also educating them too, so that they understand what it is, right? And why you're asking for that. So the education for the decision maker, not always presuming that they know, the energy stuff that we know.
Almost kind of a similar thing we discussed in our group. The one point we are discussing that if we need to do a project and we don't have any idea how to do it, then what we will be doing, how to start from, So that we are discussing mainly, and the discussion was moving around like, why not you pick up some peer kind of organization and informally start discussing that this is the thing, how you are doing or what you advise, and then to go from there. So this we were discussing.
Right, like finding those examples or case studies or stuff that others have done that you can use as at least to inform the process or what's involved in it.
Right, yeah, and where can be pros, cons, where to look after, So from there, yeah, it's a good starting point from other people's advice.
I would like to chime in on that real quick. So it's actually in terms of a short-term measure, that's a big helper. And for many organizations, it's difficult to make the first step. I'm not sure if we're talking about the first steps at this point. But yes, knowing that, say, housing unit or other similar store has implemented this and benefited and perhaps are already into that technology for years, will be helpful as a short term. Kind of finding a reference, building a reference group.
Helpful to reduce that uncertainty of like, would this work in here? That's great.
I saw something like that yesterday. I was at a conference in Ottawa for municipalities, and there was a presentation about the use of ground source heat pumps in a building. And it was interesting because a couple of people in the room said, well, I thought those were so expensive, but it turns out that they weren't. So sort of being able to see what other people have done and realize it sort of strips away some of the misconceptions about, what those costs might be. I think there might even be projects that move ahead because of that little aha that person had in that section. So yeah, those peer-to-peer transfers are so valuable.
Stephen, if I may ask you from that discussion, does the ground loop geothermal, aren't they leaking for the people inside the ground, or they're okay?
Well, we didn't really get into that, but it's that one system has been in place for 7 years and they seem to be quite happy with it. I can provide you with some information on that site if you'd like offline. So, okay.
Yeah, that will be great help because we had 3 geothermal system and all the ground loops are leaking, unfortunately.
We're in the same situation here. The leaking issue.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, either 30 years ago. A 30 years old system at that time, and everybody rushing for the incentive money from the government. So the technology was not that mature 30 years back. So we got a lot of issue. We ended up with major kind of $1 million kind of retrofit to solve the problem.
All right. I think that's something to keep in mind. But as you said, like, yeah, when those 30-year-old systems can be there. Like to think we had some really great ideas on tactics, everything from, how you present the benefits, financial, the non-energy, non-financial benefits as well, getting the stakeholders in. What I'd like you to do on your sheet is think about what you discussed in your group and what we shared here, and write down between 2 and 4 of those that you think are applicable to helping you achieve your goal that might help out. So ones that you want to sort of work on implementing, if you heard any good ideas in your group or from this broader share out, and write those down on your worksheet as part of your plan moving forward. Now, Helen, if you move to the next slide, we had some really great ideas on those short-term tactics to get that attention, to get that support and buy-in for projects or initiatives. But when it comes to when we really want to kind of fundamentally change that level of commitment and how energy efficiency, emissions reductions are prioritized within an organization, we need a bit of a different approach. Now, there are lots of different models that help us understand how people change and how we facilitate that change. And they're up here on the board, or at least some of them are up here on the screen. We're not going to go into detail about any of those at this time, but they all have one thing in common. Does anyone have a guess of what that might be? Put it into the chat or speak up. But actually, they probably have more than one thing in common if we're like really looking into it. But there's one thing in particular that I'm thinking of here as we're talking about getting this management commitment that they have in common. Yeah, so they all work to overcome that resistance. So I think all of these deal with, whenever there's a change, there's resistance to change in some way, and you want to overcome that. And one of the things with that is overcoming that resistance takes time. All of these change models, it's a process. It's not, reframing that business case, focusing on the real value proposition, all that. Yeah, Alex said multiple stage process. Those short-term tactics can be really good at getting attention, getting an approval, but this organizational change of really solidifying management commitment takes time. It takes time to move people through that process to help them overcome that resistance. And Helen, if you move to the next slide, within that, it's really helpful to think about, it's not just in terms of building that commitment. We saw before those 4 stages and you want to try to get up that arrow, but also in maintaining it to make sure that, as other priorities arise, as situation changes, as there's turnover, that the level of commitment stays and continues to grow and doesn't backslide. Does anyone have any examples where they thought there was a certain level of commitment, but then it went away, or maybe wasn't as strong anymore?
That can happen, Jay. It's Robert Smith, education sector. That can happen when there's a change in senior management.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody new comes in, they've got their own priorities. For whatever reason, the energy efforts weren't discussed as part of their new position, and whether they're moving up from a lower position within or coming in new in particular from a different organization, that can make a big difference.
Yeah, we see that a lot when there is that changeover. Maybe that person that was there before, they were committed, they were bought in, but the new person isn't. I know we've done a lot of work with the Canadian Forces bases, and it's a big challenge for them because they have the base majors change. They rotate every 2 or 3 years, and sometimes it's almost starting from scratch again of building that senior commitment. I also heard earlier someone mention about, hey, there was budgets approved for projects, and then those budgets got clawed back after we thought they were approved. So that can happen. And Helen, if you want to move to the next slide. Oh, Alex, I see your hand up.
Just a quick one. I think sometimes definitely see that when the leadership changed, but other instances where we get from kind of a feasibility study or investigation phase, when some folks would be still wearing pink glasses, we get real budgets, not even the actual cost, but budgets of those initiatives behind the decarbonization, and some folks would back up, understanding what's involved, the scope of work and how intrusive it may be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Stephen, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just very quickly to jump in on the way it goes off track. I've seen lots of commitment at a corporate level, but at a site management level, no commitment. And then again, on the shop floor, lots of commitment, but it's because the commitment was it doesn't traverse the organization, right? So you've got that site level. And I've actually even had a site manager say, it's not going to be a priority to me until it ends up in my performance review, right? So that's a common thing in organizations that are not quite as flat.
Mm-hmm. So that really speaks to, Helen, if you want to advance there, that, ideally you want to get, we saw that commitment arrow, and as those levels of commitment start being integrated, when there's systems, when there's processes, when there's, performance metrics associated with energy, that's when it becomes sticky, and it becomes resilient, and it does continue to grow. So that's where you ideally want to get to, because then if someone changes out, they come in, it's like, well, these priorities are set and they come in with KPIs associated with it, that their performance measures they're judged against, and all of that. So it becomes part of the organization, not commitment from individuals. So that's what we want to go to. So now what I want you to think about is, we talked about those tactics, and now what that could be done, and I want to think about those longer term strategies that you could begin to employ. So, strategies, can be described, I think Stephen put this as, strategies are a bunch of tactics that you put together into a plan. So they're working together. But what are the things that you can start doing or implementing so that over time you're deepening the level of commitment that management has, that you're broadening that participation, so it's not just a department or a manager or a silo within the company, but it's throughout the different levels. Stephen mentioned, there might be a gap within that, so how can you broaden that participation, and how can you build on some of those early successes that those tactics may have helped you achieve? So just as an example to help us wrap around it, one of my favorite ones, I love using the energy data to sort of like tell a story, get people's buy-in. And I remember this one energy manager, there wasn't a lot of attention being paid to energy in the organization. It wasn't a big priority. So they decided, well, I'm just going to start showing management. So they started sending monthly reports saying, here's our performance against benchmarks, against KPIs, here's the trend. It's not going the way you maybe think. It's not going on track with our targets. And I'm going to start giving you updates every month on this. And soon they started getting questions from management. Why aren't we performing well against benchmarks? Why are our KPIs not improving? And then they started expecting these reports and starting asking, what can we do about this? So that was one sort of longer term strategy of breaking down those barriers, the resistance, getting people more engaged and fundamentally caring about this, highlighting those impacts over time. So when we get into the breakout rooms this time with your group, I want you to think about what are some of those strategies, plans you can implement to deepen that commitment, broaden participation, build on that early success. And it may involve bringing more people in, but what might some of those strategies look like? And they may employ some of those tactics that we've talked about before. So Helen's going to set up the breakout rooms. So remember, when it pops up, click join. We'll have about 10-15 minutes, somewhere in that range, to discuss, and our coaches will be stopping through there just to make sure things are going smoothly. One thing that I just learned is that we can't jump between rooms once you click close, once that countdown starts.
Oh, interesting.
So as the administrators, you mean?
Yeah, like normally we can just jump between whatever rooms we want.
Okay.
But not once the countdown for closing them starts.
Are you finding that running breakout rooms is helping the flow of the sessions and getting more ideas? Like I can say from a participant, I like it.
We've gotten great feedback from having that chance to share ideas and that like peer learning and stuff like that. Like all of the feedback we've gotten from the forums, people really like it. So we want to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
And try to provide that as much as possible, particularly in things like this where hearing real life experiences is so valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the time that you've allowed for it is about right. It's definitely has enough time that several people are able to have a conversation, but it's not so long that we dry out of ideas, and you have the opportunity to sort of, what is the word, bring all those ideas together in your discussions that you have in between.
And speaking of which, Helen, if you want to switch to that next slide, we'll get on to the debrief on this one. So again, talk about those sort of longer term strategies to build that commitment. I heard some great discussions in the rooms that I popped into myself. On this one in our breakout, I think we're going to move over to room 7 first to hear from them about some strategies. So that's Abdul, Alex, Eric Kruger. Would the leader from that group want to share some strategies that came up in your discussions?
Yeah, so Abdul from Group 7. So basically, we have a different energy manager from different industries. I being the from the social housing. My long-term strategy included like doing some. I like the idea of the monthly data reporting from your side. So that's what I'm also trying to do. Another thing is to have the ISO 50001 recommendation on our long-term strategies, and I'm also trying to do some management, so decarbonization studies from now until 2050, and doing and seeing the implementation on how it works. Some other folk in our group also recommended different strategies. Some of them were thinking about the technology like AI, artificial intelligence, and again, data wise. Kyle and if I miss someone, if something, please, you can also support me.
Well, there's some really interesting ones in that the 50,001, that like the implementation of an energy management system came up in one of the groups I was in. What I really love about that, sometimes it takes some management commitment to move along that path to begin with, but within 50,001 and strategic energy management, there's a lot of components that help build those up, like documenting your energy management plan, the regular reporting on energy performance. A lot of those are things that you can, before you get that kind of top-down commitment, you can start implementing those to strengthen that resilience.
And we already did that's why like I saw that some of those steps are already taken. So I thought that it makes sense that we go in this direction, and there will be I believe more learning in this process. And the other thing is that because it's certified from the ISO, so it has a recognition in the industry, and it makes our senior management to recognize its value. Like I mean, not all of the people are from the energy field, so they do value to internationally recognized standards. So that's what I'm thinking.
Great. Yeah, that external recognition, whether it's through like a certification, 50,001, BOMA, LEED, or even awards or things like that, that can really sort of, that longer term strategy of building that commitment. People love getting awards or bragging about awards they've gotten. What about room 8? So we've got Andrew, Barbara, Mark, and Olga. Any strategies that came up in your room that you'd like to share?
Yes, Jay, I don't want to speak about the 5001. I think it's will be on all lists, but to enhance the speaker before, we think that the energy management plan, like, of course, setting up goals for your organization, it's a long-term plan because it's a commitment for the whole organization. But after that, it goes energy management plan for long term, which is should include measurement and verification strategy and regular communication on achievements is a key to keep going with the management. Plus, we believe that communication in in a sense, it's a key. So when you do something, you, of course, when people informed, they feel more engaged. And plus, when you set your organizational goals, please make sure that all your policies and standards are getting updated to continue to achieve this goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you get that sort of ongoing process and feedback. That's excellent. I did hear that maybe Michael Liskow had an interesting strategies that were maybe stolen from other areas in the organization that had some success. Michael, would you like to share that?
Sure. At the hospital, we already had a fairly strong presence on the anti-racism and social equity side of things, which our CEO was fully bought into already. And he started thinking about sort of the broader ESG exercise and really knew nothing about the long history of energy management at the hospital. So luckily we had a bunch of awards in our pocket already. We had a pretty good 10-year track record, and he was really thrilled to hear about that, and so went all in on the sort of environmental sustainability, of which energy was a part of it. And I found as I was setting up a company-wide new sustainability task force that I could actually steal a lot of the content from the anti-racism folks in terms of how they were going about achieving their objectives. And so now energy was kind of a part of environmental sustainability, which was partnered with the anti-racism. So now it's starting to build all these networks and gaining some, and which came with CEO support already built in. So that's been amazing, really good. And it's still early days for this larger exercise, but I think we're getting a framework in place that'll help us to expand well beyond energy management only in facilities and go much bigger.
No, I think I love that idea, and like leveraging or stealing those ideas from other areas that have been successful. A lot of what we talk about is like what happened with health and safety 20, 30 years ago, and like how that went from being kind of an afterthought to being integrated and really core to organizations. I think there's a lot of things there. Stephen, was there anything that you've heard come out of this group that you want to kind of really highlight or focus on?
Well, yeah, I just put a thing in the chat there just about the idea of using, like there was two perspectives. One person was using the energy, and they can speak up if they want. I don't want to call you out, but they were using the energy to sort of really get into the systems, the process systems, and that were entangled, which then uncovered energy projects, but also were able to solve problems and challenges from a process point of view. And the other group was actually doing a lot of energy monitoring. They were supported by an internal, I'm going to say, management system. They're a company that does use management systems, but not ISO. They have their own management system, their own approach. And so that allows them to sort of codify and develop or have checklists and things that really drive energy downwards. But they also do a lot of monitoring, and they were using the monitoring to then get into the predictive maintenance side of things. So again, using the monitoring to tying energy to benefits from a process, just a general sort of operational standpoint, but also then from the maintenance standpoint too. So kind of using energy to be the friend of other things and hopefully getting people's attention. And those two gentlemen can jump in if they like.
Well, I love that, and that sort of that, broadening the participation. Who is involved? Who is committed on it? Going back to that point. I think we do have to move on. We're getting close to the end of our time now. If there are other strategies that came up in your group that you want to share, please put them in the chat. We do have that, so we can continue to leverage that means of communication. I've seen some great ideas within there, and ones that were echoed in the groups that I popped into as well. Helen, if you want to move on, one of the things that we do want to announce is that applications are open for the new Save on Energy Strategic Energy Management Program. So this is a program that Save on Energy is launching, and it does involve performance incentives, milestone incentives, as well as a cohort learning model, where a lot of the focus around strategic energy management is how do you get those systems in place to build and maintain strong commitments through the organization. So this program will help organizations such as yours implement a lot of the strategies and tactics that we just talked about today. This is also a great opportunity to apply some of those short-term tactics that we talked about to convince your organization that joining the Strategic Energy Management Program is a great idea. We know this, it's aligned with ISO 50001, not with the certification side, but we do know that this is a successful framework to drive energy performance, emission reduction performance on there. So the application form, the link is in the chat to that. It's on the Save on Energy website. I know a lot of people on the call today have participated in the Energy Management Program. This is a follow-up. I encourage you to check it out. And more information about that will be coming out shortly. The other great announcement we have is that nominations for the 2022 Energy Manager Awards are now open. So just in December, we celebrated the achievement of the 2021 Energy Managers and seeing what these energy managers were able to achieve with the support of management and with their own amazing efforts. So I know a lot of people in this call have had a great year in 2022 in terms of energy management achievements. So onto the Save on Energy website, we'll get the link into the chat in our follow-up email. The deadline for applications is March 10th. So hoping to hear about all the great successes that the energy manager community has achieved. And then we'll move on to the next one, and I'll pass over to Christy to help us wrap up.
Thanks, Jay. We covered so much today. It was wonderful to be able to pop into some of the breakout rooms. Don't worry if you didn't get to hear from every person. There will be resources that come out after this event with a summary of those tactics and strategies that each group came up with, as well as some of their additional supporting information you can access from the learning platform. If you don't already have access, you can contact EMSS at Goldman to get access to the Learning Hub, and they'll have external links as well as Save on Energy resources following this event. And if on our next slide, we're going to take a couple of minutes just to allow you to give us feedback. Your feedback is important to us so we can continually improve our events. So please take a couple minutes right now to fill out our feedback form. You can scan the QR code there or check out the link in the chat to take you directly to that form. And we do have one final activity in the remaining minutes of our workshop today. So please stick with us after you complete the feedback form, and we'll continue our commitment to gaining management commitment in our final activity. All right. And so we want to have a call back to this journey. So Helen, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. That building management commitment and support for your energy management plans is a journey, and there may be setbacks along the way as people and priorities and other aspects of your organization are key to building that support. Hopefully you've been able to hear some new tactics and strategies and share your challenges with others and learn from your peers. But in our next slide, we'll just have a short activity taking you back into Menti and asking you, first, what level of management commitment do you think you have today? And then we'll move on after you've had a chance to answer that. Where do you think that's going? So Where do you see that level of commitment going a year from going to be? Where do you think that level of commitment will be a year from now? And what actions can we take to build management commitment within our organizations? So again, if you want, you can scan the QR code to get into Menti. You can use the code at menti.com, or you can click on the link in the chat to access our poll.
And Helen, can you switch over to the Menti view so we can see some of those questions coming in? Oh yeah, and you have to advance the next question. So there, the next question's up there. So now that's open. So what level of management commitment do you have today in your organization? And how you would judge it? All right, we're getting a pretty good spread. And knowing some of the organizations on the call, not completely out of line, I think, with expectations. It's good to see so far, at least. There's not too many struggling with the little to no interest, so that's a good sign. And hopefully, with some of the work that we've done today and with the Strategic Energy Management Program and other resources, we can help improve some of this. So we'll give another few seconds here before moving on to the next question.
And, you know, having an integrated commitment with it throughout the organization is the ultimate goal, but maintaining it is important too. So I remember Alex Bogan had said, maybe, I don't think we're at the starting point, but even within his organization, they're still coming back to find fresh tactics and strategies to maintain that support. So good to see.
Yeah, it is a process, not a finish line. All right. Let's move to the next question. So given where you are today, where do you see the level of commitment in your organization a year from now? With the efforts that you've been doing, with changes in the organization, with what you've learned today in terms of tactics and strategies that you can apply, what direction do you see it going?
Love to see optimism here.
A very optimistic group.
Well, it's by definition must have for an energy manager. Yeah, you gotta be optimistic. Big optimist.
The pessimistic energy managers don't last. Is
No.
that it? All right. And then we have one last question, which is, what action are you going to take in the next week or two to start building that management commitment? To be applying some of the tactics that we saw, starting to implement some of the strategies, or starting to develop plans around some of those strategies we talked about. But what are you personally going to do in the next week or two? Apply for the SEM program. I promise that wasn't a plant.
Lucky.
EM plan update. Great.
Build a team.
Oh, yeah. Getting management reps in the same room. Excellent. Excellent. All those non-energy benefits. Yeah, I think those came up in a lot of the tactics. So those can be really strong. And those are interesting ones too. They can take some thought into, like, in your particular organization or facility, and what those non-energy benefits really are. It can be a little bit of a detective work on there, but they can be really powerful once you uncover what those are. All right. There's some great commitments coming in here. This does wrap us up for today. Thank you all so much for your time and for your participation, and to all the group leaders to help facilitate those groups and provide the feedback and the debriefs of those. Thank you so much. Hopefully you're able to get some useful information or ideas out of this workshop. I hope to see you next time. We'll we'll hang out if everyone has any questions, or if you still have to type your commitment in or want to browse what other people's commitments are. But this does conclude our workshop for today. So thank you very much.